Before we start the show, I want to thank and recognize our sponsor, Christy McCullough, and her Mobile, Alabama firm, Empowered Family Law, empowering families to navigate difficult changes and create new beginnings.
You know, you're going down the road and you come upon this road sign and it's like detour ahead as a metaphor for life. Life's going to throw some detours, some obstacles. But in the end, that turned out to be a huge blessing for me. You know, some of those obstacles and detours that come, you know, you have to make the best of them. And in many cases, I think as you get through them and look back, that was good for me. That helped me to grow as a person, helped me to grow as a leader. And so keep moving forward because good things will come.
Hey everyone, this is Rod Cade and welcome to this week's episode of Rocket Motivation. This week's guest joined the U.S. Army in 1984 with the idea of becoming a radar specialist, but his commanders had other plans. Then while rising up in his rank, he tragically lost his wife of 11 years and then had to raise his 3 children alone without his partner. On this episode, we will talk about our guest's life and lessons and how he adjusted to unforeseen obstacles and curveballs that he details and teaches others to do in his new book, Treading the Deep. Command Sergeant Major Bradley Jones, welcome to Rocket Motivation.
Great to be here. Really happy to be on the show. Thank you.
Okay, great, man. Hey, Brad, so tell us where you are now in your life, kind of where you live, family, what you do.
Well, I live in Lehi, Utah, which is about halfway between Provo and Salt Lake City. And I work for the Federal Aviation Administration, and I work in the Air Traffic Control Center in what's called the Service Operations Center. And we are basically the group that monitors all the data that comes in and gives the air traffic controllers all the information they need to control air traffic. But it's what I've been doing for the last 12 years. And I retired officially from the Guard in 2020. And so I spent the last basically 25 years in the aviation world and with the 211th Aviation Battalion. Once I lost my first wife, I remarried and we combined my 3 kids and her 1 daughter. And then we had 2 of our own. So we have 6 children. So the oldest is a young man and the youngest is 15, 4 girls in between. I've got 2 at home that are still in high school. And for my hobbies, I run, hike, road bike, mountain bike, and I play disc golf whenever I can.
Okay. Well, that sounds like you are pretty busy. Hey, so let's go back to 1984. You enlist in the Army. All right, so tell us why you enlist in the Army, but also what you were planning to specialize in.
I was hanging out with my best friend one day after graduation. He'd already enlisted, and so asked me if I'd accompany him to the recruiting office because he needed to go to there and do something. So I went in there with him. Of course, you know, recruiters being recruiters, they said, "Oh, hey, you know, what are you interested in? What do you got planned for after high school?" I didn't really have anything in mind at the time. And so they said, "Well, why don't you take the practice ASVAB test?" So I did, and I did pretty well on it. And they said, "Well, there's really no jobs that you can't do in the Army." I wanted a job that was technical, that would provide for something after the Army, and also to save some college money. So I looked through a number of different career fields. And at the time, a memory flashed in my mind of when my parents would take us to the airport and we'd watch the planes land. And I told them about that memory. And the recruiter said, "Well, oh, you want to be a pilot?" And I said, "No, I don't want to be a pilot," because I had a really scary experience on a flight and had no interest in being a pilot. But they kind of keyed on what I said, and they started showing me some, you know, stuff in that career field, in the aviation career field, and happened upon being a radar repairman. And so I looked at the position and looked at him and said, "You get me that job and I'll join." That's kind of how it began. And like you said, I was really only interested in getting that technical experience and then getting out after 4 years and moving on with my life and going to college and building on that practical experience that the Army gives soldiers. So
you study and train in the radar repair for about a year, right? Things didn't go as planned, did they?
No. So I got to my school, and it was originally scheduled for only 22 weeks. But because of some delays, I ended up being there for 52 weeks. And some of the delays were normal, but right near the end, when we were about to depart for our permanent duty station, and I had orders to go to Germany, which I was extremely excited about, the Army's made some changes to your MOS, and they've added this extra course, and you are going to be the guinea pig. So you have to stay here and finish out this extra 10-week course. The Army made their decision, so we ended up staying, and they deleted all of our orders. So at the end of the 10 weeks, when they announced what our orders were, we were all pretty much going stateside, and I pretty much got the best assignment out of everybody. And they sent me to Fort Huachuca, Arizona. And then when I got to Fort Huachuca, I got down to the section that I was assigned to, and I looked around, and this place is nowhere near the airfield. And so I finally asked somebody, like, well, where are the radars? And they realized what I was asking. They realized that I was looking for what I was imagining I was going to work on. And they said, oh, yeah, you're not going to work on radars in this section. We're part of the electronic proving ground, and we test and evaluate all the new electronic systems that have yet to be fielded. And we evaluate them for reliability, maintainability, and logistics. And so that was a major shock after being in school for 52 weeks and being told that the Army needs you to do this other job.
This is your first real experience with, I guess, leadership in the Army when you get there and, I guess you question, well, wait a minute, what's going on here?
I quickly learned who the boss was in the section. The non-commissioned officer in charge, the NCOIC, was an E8. He was a master sergeant. I was an E3. And so he was way above me. And so he had his office. And so I knocked on his office door and said, can I talk to you? And he said, come on in. And I just told him how I felt. I said, I just spent 52 weeks in school, and I joined the Army to work on radars, and disappointed is an understatement. That was a huge risk, because he could have just said, hey, kid, shut up and deal with it. You're in the Army. I would have been like, yes, Sergeant, but he didn't. And he said, well, let's go down. Let's go down to the radar lab. He said, if you want to transfer down to the radar lab, I am totally fine with that. That surprised me that he had that kind of approach. So we drove down there. We went inside, and there was that master sergeant that I was told I was going to work for. And he came out and he said to Master Sergeant Crumling, or he was Jack, said to Jack, what brings you down here? And he said, well, got a soldier here that just got trained in the 26 Delta MOS, and like to find out about possibly transferring down here. That Master Sergeant looked at Jack and said, and looked at me, you don't want to be down here, because they just transferred total control of the airfield over to contractors, because they made that runway an alternate landing site for the space shuttle. And he pointed to all the other soldiers that were down there that were my MOS and said, we are all waiting for orders to go somewhere else. There's nothing to do here. And then he looked at me and said, are you you going to be in Jack's section? And I said, yeah. And he said, Jack will take care of you. And it's an extremely unique assignment. And so, I kind of took a deep breath and accepted it. And then we got out to the vehicle, and Jack said, let me show you some stuff. So we drove around the base. He took me to various facilities on the base, because the EPG was spread out all over Fort Huachuca. And we went and saw the Genesis to drones project was being tested. Night vision goggles were being tested. And the system that was the Genesis to GPS was being tested. Yeah. And so we went to these various facilities. And of course, Jack knew people at each one. By the end of it, he just turned to me and said, well, what do you think? Are you on the team? And I was like, absolutely.
He could have just said, like you said, hey, hey, soldier, you're in the Army, you do what you're told. So this guy takes his time to show you around and let you buy into it. How important was that to you? And I guess really you're kind of your first taste of leadership in the Army, which was a good experience. How did that kind of shape and develop you?
That lesson distilled upon me over time. I didn't see it right at first, but as I moved up in the ranks, it showed me that as a leader, if you can give people the vision, enlighten them with the bigger picture, then soldiers will act accordingly. And that was an extremely important lesson that I never forgot as I became a senior leader. And you realize that down to the lowest level, those soldiers may not know the purpose for why we're doing training a certain way, or some of the metrics that the military is constantly trying to meet. And so I just took that as a lesson to always be willing to impart the view that I had as a senior leader to the soldiers down at the lowest level, the brand new soldiers. I can tell you without question, the buy-in was almost guaranteed. If you could impart the vision to those younger soldiers, the buy-in was guaranteed.
Yeah. And when you're over in, during your deployments in Kuwait and Afghanistan, so I mean, you're head of the battalion that's basically repairing and fixing the Apache helicopters so they can fly on the next missions.
Exactly.
And
Yep.
and the Apache helicopter, that's the number one weapon over there, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, the amount of requests that we got to provide what they call close air support, if a logistics convoy was going somewhere, from one base to another, they wanted Apaches flying above it. The soldiers that were out, the infantry units that were out, and they'd have these, what they called ticks, which was troops in contact. They would immediately call for backup from the Apaches. So in Afghanistan, we had a base that had SEAL teams on it, Army Special Forces, and Navy SEALs. And their jobs were to go out and disrupt the Taliban, to capture high value targets and stuff like that. Well, we had 2 aircraft that just would take off from our base and go land on their base and get briefed with those guys on their mission set, and then accompany the SEAL teams and the special forces out to accomplish their missions. Apaches were absolutely instrumental in so many ways on a combat deployment.
You're the head guy when it comes to repairing these Apaches, and you got a bunch of soldiers or mechanics under you. So what's your leadership style based upon what you experienced?
I had 6 section leaders under me, and I sat them down one day and I looked each one in the eye and I said, I've never done your job. I've never run the aircraft maintenance section. I've never run production control. I've never run quality control. I've never run sheet metal, prop and rotor, supply. But I just basically said, you guys are the subject matter experts. My job is to make you successful, and I back you up. And my success comes because you guys are successful. I guess that leadership atmosphere just it breeds creativity. It motivates soldiers because they have ownership, they have skin in the game, and so it worked out really well.
I guess one of the main curveballs you first dealt with was when you went to 52 weeks of radar school, and then that went away, and so you had to make a detour and go a different route there. Let's talk about when your wife of 11 years passes away. Kind of tell us what happened, and then how did that affect you, and how did you deal with that?
Well, obviously, it's something that you would never consider to occur at 37. When she passed away, I walked around for several months just thinking over and over again, I can't believe this happened to me. And this is the kind of thing that happens when you're like, I don't know, 70, 80, something like that. I just absolutely unexpected. She battled fibromyalgia, and they started her on a new pain patch, and they were brand new at the time. And the pain patches, those initial ones, were defective, and they released all the medication at once. And so it was an accidental overdose. And I was at a 2-week military school. I was at an advanced leadership training finished the course, graduated on Friday, started to make the drive north to home. When I hit the Arizona-Utah border, I called home and said, "Hey, I'm going to try to drive straight through the night, and then I'd like to be there and surprise the kids before they get up." And so I pulled in probably about 5 o'clock in the morning, and went in and saw the kids, and then went into my room. And after being married for 11 years, how your spouse sleeps. And I stopped at the foot of the bed and looked over, and realized that something was wrong. She had her hair in her face where she always had it pulled back, and walked around to the side of the bed and reached my hand over and put it on her hip, and she was cold. And I knew at that point, my youngest daughter, my 4-year-old, was actually asleep on my side of the bed, and I went and scooped her up and brought her out into the other room, and called 911, and the paramedics came, and I pointed down to the bedroom, and they went down with their equipment, and within probably 30 seconds they came back and just shook their heads. "Sorry, she's gone." And it was a moment in time. Your life absolutely is just drastically changed in the blink of an eye. And so we had the funeral, and at one point in the funeral, I just looked out across the crowd, and I just realized, that the military is one giant blended family. And so many of the associations and the faces of the people at the funeral, I realized, were because of my service. And, it was an amazing feeling to look out and see all these faces. And I mean, my family were there, my parents were there, and my brother, and my wife's family was there and stuff. But I honestly looked out across that crowd, and I just realized that I had amazing friends, amazing associations, and they just stepped up and were there for me. And I realized that just where else can you really get that? I know there's other organizations, and I'm not trying to downplay any of those, but in large measure, the support that came in the years after was probably, in the majority, was from my brothers and sisters in my unit.
Well, and let's talk about, and this might be a good segue into this. You've written a book called Treading the Deep. Why did you write it?
Well, in the Army, they send you through the Sergeant Major Academy. So while we were deployed in Afghanistan, I was basically told that you're going to go through the Sergeant Major's Academy. And I didn't want to, because we were busy. We were getting ready to redeploy back stateside. The Sergeant Major I had at the time said, "You're going. I don't want to hear it. You're going." So I started doing the coursework while I was still in Afghanistan. And then it continued on after I returned home. And one of the things that they do in the leadership training and the advanced leadership courses is they have you write papers. And many of the papers that I wrote were what they call personal experience papers, where they just say, "We want a 10-page paper, your choice of subject. It's going to be a PEP paper, and it's your choice. You write it on what you choose." Many of those papers I wrote on the early leaders I had, and some of the other things that happened that are in the book, absolutely embarrassing things that happened that I can certainly laugh about now, but I did not laugh about at the time. And when I got done and graduated from the Sergeant Major's Academy, I had, quite a body of work already on paper. And my last commander that I served under he wrote a really inspirational command philosophy for the battalion. Just a lot of leaders do that. And I had worked on it a little bit here and there and stuff. And then he wrote his, and I saw it, and I was very impressed by it. So we talked about it, and he said, "Why don't you write yours?" So once I started writing, I just pulled all those papers. Once I started writing, it just snowballed from there. And before I knew it, I probably had 40,000 words. So that's where it started.
Well, and the book title, Treading the Deep, where did it come from?
That came out of that conversation I told you about when I got all my section leaders together before we went into Afghanistan. While we were at Texas, doing mobilization training, one of my section leaders had called me to complain about one of the other section leaders. And I remember just thinking, nope, we are not doing this. And I texted all of them and said, meeting in my office at 7 o'clock tonight. I sat down with them and I just said, look, I don't know your jobs. You are one step away from where I am at now. And you're far enough along in your career that you should know how to solve problems at your level. And I said, you need to know how to tread deep waters. And they all sat there and, kind of stunned silence. And I said, if you have a problem with another section leader, I expect you to call that section leader and work it out. I will not act as a referee or a parent in this equation. No how, no way. If you try to work it out, can't seem to come to a solution, then fine. Then you can come to me and I'll give you my guidance. But you need to solve problems at your level. And we got probably the most medals of any company in the battalion were because the performance of our soldiers.
And so, Brad, let me ask you this. So based on your life experiences, I mean, your leadership and then also the twists and turns that you've had to go through, what advice would you give the listeners who all of a sudden they have experienced something that they're not expecting, something odd, strange, new, different hits them? What do you tell them? How do they get through it?
When I first started writing the book, and before I had come up with the title of Treading the Deep, the working title was Detour Ahead. You're going down the road and you come upon this road sign and it's like detour ahead as a metaphor for life. We all are moving forward, or at least trying to move forward in life and stuff. And life's going to throw some detours, some obstacles. I certainly didn't imagine not being able to work on radars and having to learn a completely new job. But in the end, that turned out to be a huge blessing for me and a huge benefit to my career. That environment was absolutely unique and instrumental in helping me develop as a person. And, some of those obstacles and detours that come, you have to make the best of them. And in many cases, I think as you get through them and look back, you'll realize, okay, I needed that. That was good for me. That helped me to grow as a person, helped me to grow as a leader. And so the life lessons that are contained in the book are my hopes to pass on all the great lessons, the lessons that Jack taught me. There's another soldier I talk about who was a sergeant over me, Roger Melvin, who was a close friend who was killed, dealing with having the first death of somebody that was very close to me. That was a huge shock to a 19, 20-year-old kid, and having to deal with that, going to honor Roger and his service and be a part of his funeral. That was absolutely monumental. And so, it's those things that I have had plenty of friends that have served in the military, that have had close associates, other soldiers that have been killed in action, that kind of thing. And I can say without question that the majority of them are absolutely grateful for what that person brought into their life. Obviously didn't want that person, that person's life to end, but at the same time, afterwards, they just realized what that person brought to them. And obviously having my wife, the closest person that we have in our life alongside our own children, the departure of my wife, that absolutely, I grew tremendously from that experience in ways that I never thought possible. And so the great thing, like I said, about the military is that it's just, it's a blended family. And I would tell soldiers, you're going to meet people that are going to have a huge impact on your life, whether you know it or not. They're going to have a huge impact on you. And you may not like all the people that you meet. You probably won't, but I can promise you that you will meet people that will have a major impact on the direction of your life and help you to grow as a person. And it was kind of my tribute to my soldiers and the soldiers I served with, as a way to, share with them the lessons that really taught me along the way, and hopefully to instill in them the mantra, moving forward in life. Life throws obstacles and detours at you, and keep moving forward because good things will come.
And Brad, Rocket Motivation is all about, dealing with and overcoming adversity. What advice would you give about overcoming adversity?
The benefit that we have in the military is that there are other soldiers around who can ease the burden. And if you don't have the military, hopefully you have family members around that you can turn to and get help from. And the one thing I learned in the military was that they got you up early every day, and especially things like running. Running was a huge metaphor for me because when I started out in the military, I did not like running, and my body screamed, "Stop! Stop! What are you doing? Why are you doing this? Stop! Stop!" But I found that as I forced myself to do those hard things, that I started to experience the runner's high. And it's a euphoric feeling where you feel like you can go on for forever, for a long time as a runner. And I have always remembered that metaphor that the military, it's not comfortable. Your body's going to be telling you, no, don't do this, stop. But you push through that. And what I can promise you is if you do that consistently, then you will have that runner's high in whatever aspect that you're moving forward in life in. And it doesn't come early, it comes later. And so whatever I'm doing in life, wherever I'm going, if I can push through those rough patches, there's good things on the other side.
Right. So, Brad, if somebody wants to buy your book, Treading the Deep, how can they get it?
They can go to Amazon and buy it on Amazon. They can buy paperback, Kindle version. The audiobook's available. It's out on Audible. They can go to Barnes & Noble, has them. And so they can visit me on Facebook, bradley.jones.3914. I'm on Instagram at author Bradley Jones, and then on Twitter at author BP Jones. So if they want to look up do a search, just put in treadingthedeep.com and it'll take them right to the landing page on Facebook that's all about my book.
Okay, great. So Brad, it's been a pleasure having you on, man. This has been a great conversation with you, but I'm not letting you go yet. I always give the guest the parting shot. So kind of dig deep, maybe something out of your book, a lesson, but give us something good to take us home.
Well, one thing that has been a part of me for a lot of years has been my faith, and that we all have a purpose in life. One of the questions that I always ask new soldiers was, what are you passionate about? And help them to discover, if they haven't yet, what they're passionate about in life. Because I've seen when I was a college student, it was, well, I want to be a lawyer because they make huge amounts of money. Well, you might become a lawyer and then realize that you hate being a lawyer. So discover what you're passionate about. And one of the things that I loved about the military was that it is a breeding ground for people to tune in to what they're passionate about in life. If you can discover that about yourself and, do that thing that you're passionate about, it's not work. It's something that comes natural to a person. And so one of the things that obviously got me through the rough patches was, my faith in God and my faith in this great country that we're so blessed to live in. I've lived out of this country. I've lived in Australia. I've lived in Argentina. I've lived in Afghanistan. I've lived in Kuwait. And I've seen what life is like outside of this country. And what I can tell you is that the majority of the people out there, they are extremely interested in America as a concept. And I'm always amazed at the people that do make it here and partake of the American dream by, working hard and moving forward. And we can too. We're just blessed to have been born here. And those opportunities are available to everybody. And when I would go talk to classes, grade schools, always be looking to move forward and always take advantages of the great opportunities that we have as Americans in this country. It's an amazing thing to be a U.S. citizen and to live in this great country.
All right. Well, see, that was a great parting shot, Brad. So, hey, I want to thank you so much again for coming on. It's been my pleasure having you on. Thanks so much.
Rod, always a pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show, and best of luck to you, and thanks again.
Great episode with Command Sergeant Major Brad Smith. Life never moves in a straight line, and you have to be able to deal with surprises, disappointments, and changes. Brad has certainly done that. And what I love the most is he shares his life and life lessons to help others. We'll have another great guest on Rocket Motivation next week. See you then. Thanks again for listening to Rocket Motivation. I want to again thank our sponsor, Christy McCullough, and her firm, Empowered Family Law. Listeners in the Mobile County, Alabama area, get in touch with Chrissy and Empowered Family Law for all your family law issues and needs. If you would like to get my book, Get Back Up, it's available at Amazon. Just put in Get Back Up and my name, Rod Cade, and the book will pop up. I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe to Rocket Motivation wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please rate and review the shows and spread the word about Rocket Motivation to your friends. So until next time, remember, never give up and always get back up.